England, they sort of speak with more than one tongue. But yeah, King Charles' visit to Canada, then, eh? Is that what we're starting off with?
Yeah, I think it's a really good story. He made this throne speech when he was here, and he made a hasty departure. So it's almost like whatever his agenda was, once it was done, he couldn't get out fast enough. I don't know. Maybe he's not fond of the place. Maybe he thinks we're all barbarians. I don't know. But anyway, he got on the plane as fast as he could and took off after his throne speech.
Wow. I I know recently there's been some kind of half truths. I call it half truths because I don't know why, but they never tell you the full truth. Again, it's probably what you were saying about speaking with two tongues
Forked
or
tongue, yeah.
meaning two different meanings. They were talking about him being more open about his cancer now. Apparently, he's got the prostate cancer, but it's under control. He's got another cancer, but they're not revealing what. And also, they seem to think he's going to last forever, even though there's plans in place to, cover it when he goes. So yeah, two tongues again.
Well, I'm I've always felt that they had plans to make William king. So I think his reign wasn't intended to be short-lived anyway. So there's a little double entendre from me, a short-lived reign.
Yeah, I guess it's his age as well. He'd be
Yeah,
short lived because he's not that young anymore.
yeah. I don't know his age. Do you?
Well, that's a guess. He's probably 80, but let me just. I'll cheat. It's the only way sometimes. No, he's only 76. I wouldn't have believed he was only 76.
Oh, there you go. 76, eh?
Camilla's 77, and yeah, William's 42.
Hmm, interesting. All right. Well, anyway, when he was giving his throne speech, he declared Canada's illegitimacy with a land acknowledgement to the First Nation people that occupied the land where Ottawa, the capital, is, and basically conceded that Canada is terra nullius, which means it's an illegitimate country. It shouldn't exist. It's illegitimate. That's what terra nullius means. So that's a very dramatic claim to make because what that means is nothing is valid. Nothing. Not the passport, not the citizenship, not the laws. Nothing. It's a completely invalid entity. It can't be seen any other way from a legal standpoint. Now, most of the public doesn't know anything about the law and what this statement means will go through one ear and out the other as far as the Canadian public is concerned because they're um, probably not getting it, the significance of it. Most people will not understand. At one level, it's an ambiguous throne speech. It could be taken either way. At one point, he said something highly positive about the True North Strong and Free, which comes from our national anthem. He declared that, this was the True North Strong and Free, and it will remain so. It's a sovereign land that will never become the 51st state. He was basically seemingly defending the country against Trump's rather presumptuous claim that it's going to become the 51st state. On the other hand, this declaration that he's made about it being an illegitimate country, terra nullius, that's basically rendering the country powerless, impotent, absolutely, got no ability to defend itself. If you're a non-entity, how can you defend yourself? So that could mean that he's just opening up a can of worms so that the United States can just annex the country, grab it, and done. I don't know. It could be either way. I don't trust these elites, Andy. They always talk with, as the First Nations people here say, white man talk with forked tongue. Absolutely.
Yeah, I watched a video the other day, and 2 or 3 of the UK people that were really good on YouTube, and they've got over 100,000 followers. They said what the guy said in principle was true, and what this Islamic person said, and I'll say Islamic person because it wasn't Indian or Chinese, or they were definitely Islamist, and they said Canada, America, and I believe 2 other countries were basically handed over to them, whereas certain countries, people had to work for a living and get their country going properly, whereas Canada and America was like a gift. So they shouldn't be living on that land. They should be living somewhere else because it isn't their land, basically. And now you're saying this about the king. Maybe it's all linked.
Well, I mean, I find this claim kind of dubious about, land claims and staking one's claim on a certain territory. I mean, I'm sure that all of our lands at some point in history have been invaded by foreign groups that have moved in and basically taken over. And look at England, for example. There seems to have been some destructive cataclysm that struck England and killed the Celts, the Celtic people, and wiped them out, exterminated them. And there is a theory that it was a meteor strike, that a meteor, rather like a bullet ricochets, it hit a mountain, and then its trajectory was redirected, and it made a swath right up the middle of England, and then exited into the North Sea off the coast of Scotland. Apparently, it just exterminated the whole population, and then the Anglo-Saxons, which came over from Saxony, Germany, came over, and they did trade in England regularly, and they came and they said, "Where is everybody?" They just stayed, occupied the territory, and took over. You actually, if you talk to John Hamer, he's aware of this story, and I really think there's some validity to it. Andy, have you never heard this? Because you look like you're overwhelmed.
No, I was sort of thinking ahead a little bit, and yeah, maybe we'll just. Do you know what? In history, what I don't get is why man was only made like 2000 and not made, but existed, or whatever you call it, 2025 years. It blows my mind.
Yeah,
Where everything
you mean
happened according
civilization?
to certain parts of the Bible after Jesus, but there must have been people before that, surely. Then it goes back to the Big Bang. Is Is it a bang? Is it a flat Earth? Is it a round Earth? That's what really blows my mind, rather than what you've just said.
Well, I mean, the story, that the fable that we've been fed through our education system about civilization and how old civilization is really a misrepresentation. And there's more and more information coming out, and disclosures coming out that indicate that civilization is much, much older than we've been told. And of course, there's this other factor, which is that there have been a series of cataclysms historically, and the world has had to restart on several occasions, not not least the flood, the famous, well-known worldwide flood that took place. It caused this whole global cataclysm, which forced us to start again. So, yeah, I think that's the point, is that the creation myth is a myth, and the whole story about civilization is also a fable. Um, when I was traveling throughout my career, I found that each part of the world had its own story about where civilization emerged. And so when I was in the Far East, the Koreans were promoting the view that at least certain factions of the Korean population were promoting the view that civilization began there. And of course, we know that the Western civilization has long promoted the view that civilization began in Mesopotamia. But did it really? Because there's stories about how Ur in Mesopotamia was actually founded by a displaced people that emerged from the Indus Valley, from India. I've believed for some time that Indian civilization is much older than our Western European civilization. Um, I mean, the Vedas go back 5,000 years, but that's just the compilation of the texts so that they became available. I'm sure the actual works and the Sanskrit language are much, much older. I would say that Indian civilization probably goes back 40,000 years. And our civilization, which we claim started it all, uh, was about 5,000 years in the making. It's been like 5,000 years ago that the Mesopotamian civilization, the Chaldean, um, Sumerian civilizations go back to around 5,000 years ago. Um, I've never believed it, Andy. I've always felt that the story was a fabrication and that civilization began much, much earlier in a different part of the world. And yeah, India being one. But I'm sure that there's more than one birthplace of civilization, and I'm also sure that it's much, much older than we've been told. And I'm also sure there's been a series of reboots historically because of cataclysms of one kind or another. Anyway, let's go on with this story here. King Charles
Yes.
just admitted Canada sits on unceded land. What are the implications of this statement? Canada is a terra nullius nation state, meaning illegitimate. Can't be taken any other way. The statement that he's making is, from a legal standpoint, very clear. Illegitimate, vulnerable, and possibly up for annexation by our southern neighbor. Making this statement certainly doesn't help the country maintain its sovereignty. I mean, come on. Okay. The words dropped like a bombshell, not whispered, not mumbled, spoken publicly, clearly in Canada's capital city of Ottawa by none other than the King Charles III. This isn't a diplomatic nicety. This isn't symbolic. It's an admission, a stunning, unprecedented confession, one that shakes the very foundation of Canadian sovereignty. The King of England just admitted that Canada is built on stolen, unceded land. Let's let's be clear about that. In the middle of the political heart of Canada, Ottawa, the head of the British monarchy, the so-called symbol of unity and historical legitimacy, acknowledged he is standing on territory that has never been ceded by its original inhabitants. No treaty, no surrender, no legal transfer of land, which means one thing: Canada is an illegitimate nation state. Can't be taken any other way. That's what he meant. Unequivocally, that's what he meant. But the thing that makes it equivocal is the fact that he's made other statements that contradict and say the exact opposite, which is that Canada is the true north, strong and free. Okay, so it's terra nullius status, a land that is, in legal terms, belonging to no one because the original ownership was never formally recognized or extinguished. That term, once used to justify colonial conquest, now circles back like like a pack of hounds turning on their master. What does this mean, really? This isn't symbolic anymore. This isn't ceremonial lip service. This is a political earthquake. Because those words, Charles just didn't just make a statement, he triggered a legal and historical reckoning, one that could unravel the illusion of Canadian legitimacy, one that opens the door legally to annexation, challenges to sovereignty, international disputes, and yes, even redefinition of borders. So it's true, absolutely. This makes Canada extremely vulnerable because this is a statement that's gone worldwide and it will surely be noted by the international press around the world. So, what are the implications for Canada? Not good. How can you protect your 200-mile limit around your coastline against foreign trawlers when you have no legal jurisdiction to protect the territory because you've been called by a very high ranking world official a terra nullius non-entity? How can you patrol your territorial waters, send out your coast guard, and chase off a foreign vessel for illegally fishing in your fishery? You have no right. You can't do so anymore. They will protest, there'll be a diplomatic wrangle. The Japanese trawlers, or whoever they are, these foreign trawlers, will say you have no jurisdiction, you're an illegitimate state, how can you patrol these waters? They're international waters now. You can't tell us to go. No, you don't have any authority. Stuff like that is going to be a hotbed. It's just going to be a serious problem in the future to defend the sovereignty, the territorial sovereignty of this place.
Talking about that, the water and the fisheries, our silly Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, he's basically done a deal with Europe.
Yeah.
So Europe now owns our waters and our fish. So that will allow the illegals to come in. But on this King Charles thing, one of the sort of fancy magazines in the UK called The Spectator says, has King Charles gone do-dally on his trip to Canada? And they refer to, he said basically the monarchy owns 90% of Canadian land. Maybe that's where all this is coming from.
I dispute that. We have crown land here, but I do not think that means the monarchy, the British sovereign, the monarch, the king owns the land. I do not believe that. I think it refers to Temple Crown, which is in the city of London. The city of London is 1 square mile. It's a city within a city, and it's called Temple Crown. And there is Temple Bar, which is the legal district. And Temple Crown is what I believe is referred to. And they own the unclaimed land in the Dominion of Canada and probably other former colonies as well. It was founded by the Knights Templar, Temple Crown, and Temple Bar, again, is named after them. They founded the whole legal system, the Inns of Court, the 5 Inns of Court, the Inner Temple, the Outer Temple, Gray's Inn, Lincoln's Inn, and Gray's Inn, Lincoln's Inn. Yeah, there's 5 Inns of Court. Middle Temple, I think, is what I missed. Inner Temple, Outer Temple, Middle Temple, Gray's Inn, and Lincoln's Inn. 5 Inns of Court. So Temple Crown is probably what the authority is that controls the crown land or owns the crown land in former colonies like Canada.
Yeah, obviously, it says in other places, that it's disputed, but what the rumours are that each country basically owns a majority of their own land. But that was interesting article anyway.
Yeah, I mean, probably at this stage, the crown land in Canada is controlled by the government of Canada, but the original name Crown Land probably comes from Temple Crown in the city of London. And when you look at Temple Bar, it holds a great legal authority internationally because all the lawyers in various countries have to go to the bar. What are they talking about? They're talking about Temple Bar. They have to pass the legal requirements to become a barrister, a lawyer, whatever. They have to go through the bar exam. Where does it get its name? From Temple Bar, which means that legal district in London holds international authority over the whole Commonwealth of nations. So we all have to pass the bar exam in order to qualify as lawyers. Yes,
On
Ed?
the well, on that royal note,
Mm-hmm.
I think we've maybe exhausted that little article. It's on the royal note. Prince Harry
Yeah.
has asked Princess Diana's brother, which is probably his uncle, if he should change his family name to Spencer after his mum, and that's causing a bit of a row within the within the monarchy. I don't understand why that would cause a row because you can call yourself what you want these days, can't you?
Yeah, that's odd. Very, very odd. What is this row between Prince William and
Harry.
Harry? Sorry, Prince Harry. Yeah.
Well, I don't think they've made it totally public. That's the problem. Um, Hang on, I'll just Google that because it keeps changing. I thought it was over something about their mum, but um, and then something to do with their dad as well. Oh, Prince Harry's going to be even angrier in the new royal row. Well, that's what I just said. Prince Harry banded troubled and
And did you recall that story about how the Rothschilds bailed out the royal family back in the early 20th century? And following that, they gained breeding rights, which means that the royals are not royal, they are Rothschilds. That essentially the Rothschild family became the British royal family. So you want to talk about illegitimacy? It would seem that they are the illegitimate rulers of the nation and the Commonwealth. If that claim is true, do you think it's true?
not sure. But I was just going to ask you a question about why did Harry and his his brother have a rift? It was actually all over. Believe it or not, something very stupid, and only you. Well, this is me being common. I think only a snob could make this up as a rift. They're arguing over the word HRH, his or her Royal Highness. Now, when Harry, that's it, and Meghan went to the US, they kept using the word HRH in their titles, and it pissed off the king and it pissed off his brother, and that's why they've had a rift. Not over something normal, but just using a three-letter word. It don't make no sense. Well,
So, in other words, when you're not on British soil and
well,
you've
royal duties in Britain, yeah. When
and
you're
you're
not on
not
official duties, you can't use. The agreement was you shouldn't use that name, and that's why they're arguing.
okay, this makes sense. So they're not on British soil and they're not performing their royal duties. So to maintain the title of royalty while you're an expat living abroad, just um, yeah, it's almost like a prodigal son type of story.
And
William,
Harry's a bit like me, he would probably be thinking, well, you're my dad, you're my brother, that was my mum. I am part of the royal family. Why can't I use it? That's his attitude, and the other attitude is the opposite to that. You shouldn't be using it.
Yeah, it seems that it's a prodigal son story. He's left the farm and he's not maintaining his duties, and so the other son is resentful because he's maintaining his responsibilities and doing his dutiful best to support the family and the father. And so he resents the prodigal son from, you know, getting undeserved benefits from being negligent of duty and buggering off to the colonies, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah, I get it. Now, thanks for clarifying that because I really didn't know what the row was about.
I thought it was normal brother stuff, but no, it's more complicated than God. Why would you fall out your brother over using the name? But you wouldn't fall out, you disagree. But yeah, it's very strange.
Well, to me, it's just typical family wranglings. I mean, it happens in every family as far as I'm concerned. Um, I've had equally as petty disputes with my my brother. So yeah, I can see it. I can totally relate to it. I can understand. Okay.
Well,
Anyway,
from
yeah.
from your own sort of books and that, it's basically true. All the world is staged, and we just merely played. That's a good one. That's where that comes in.
So anyway, what do you think the motive of Charles giving that throne speech was? To reassert Canadian sovereignty or to do the opposite? Because it's really an ambiguous throne speech that can be read either way.
Well, like I said, they're talking over here that he's doing his king stuff into political stuff, and he should stick to his king stuff. So is that going over his remit? But then if your elected politicians or your leader of the country is not doing kind of that sort of stuff, then that's probably why the king, because he's not just stepped into this area, he's stepped into loads of areas where he shouldn't be stepping. So he's quite good at putting his foot in it.
Well, throughout his career, he has overstepped the bounds of his figurehead role on several occasions, even at one point recommending certain architectural recommendations to the country's architects and how building design should be. And, he's not an expert in the field, yet he had this aesthetic preference, which he was not shy about voicing. And yeah, I mean, the Queen at one point interfered with the nation of Australia in having a certain Prime Minister of Australia impeached by her royal authority. Do you remember that?
Yeah, a little bit. I've just been reading the King's speech in the Canadian Parliament. It's quite amazing.
Yeah.
The trouble is there's too many French words in there.
Yeah, he did speak in both languages in the throne speech. It's true.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you gotta let him try, I suppose. That's what they do.
Well, my question is what prompted him to do this? What is the hidden agenda? And on whose behalf is he making this throne speech? Is it to seal Canada's fate so that it can be annexed by the United States, or is it to do the opposite, to defend what was formerly British North America against encroachment from the southern neighbor? It's one or the other.
Yeah, just going through all his articles. It just seems to be wishing everybody in the world good luck. it, it, on their website, the Royal.uk Media Centre, it puts out all his articles, but I don't think he's doing too much other than trying to be nice. Well, sort of. God, there's a couple of things you would wonder why he said.
Well, I mean, it is possible that he was in the role of a foreign diplomatic role. He was politely acknowledging the First Nations people and the fact that the land that Canada is now on was formerly their land. Why he would admit that, I'm not sure. It's possible that during his visit he met with some Indigenous chiefs and spoke about the truth regarding the nation's history and the land treaties and so on, and he had to admit and confess the truth to them. And since this truth and reconciliation political agenda is so strong in the country today, it may be that he felt it necessary to reference it and address it and speak to it. But because of the fact that he's made two such contradictory statements, the True North Strong and Free and Terra Nullius, I mean, these are totally contradictory. On the one hand, the country is strong and sovereign and free. On the other hand, it's completely impotent and powerless because it is terra nullius. It's illegitimate, and as an illegitimate state, it has no legal authority in any respect whatsoever. I mean, those are two completely opposite claims. And so the ambiguity of his speech is a problem. What was his true aim? What was his true agenda? Was he defending Canada's sovereignty or doing the opposite, setting it up for annexation by the southern neighbor?
Yep, I mean, we can guess on that one, I guess.
Well, I mean, for me, Andy, the problem is he's opened up a legal can of worms and made it difficult with the terra nullius illegitimacy claim for the nation to defend any of its laws, or for that matter, defend its territory against any kind of foreign encroachment.
It does say one of the headlines, Canada strong and free, and other takeaways from King's Throne speech. King Charles III have given a major speech and so on. The King who was Canada's head of state, said relationships with partners, including the US, were changing, and he stressed the sovereignty of both nations. Here are 5 takeaways from the Tuesday address. Tensions with Canada's neighbours were a theme throughout. The US president was never mentioned by name, though. Well, they're just arguing over tariffs, aren't they? We'll give you this goods, but you got to charge this. Yeah, yeah, trade war. That's a word.
Well, yeah, I mean, the trade war and the imposition of tariffs seems to be part of the Trump administration's effort to put Canada in a very difficult position so that economically we have no choice but to allow for annexation because we cannot economically survive on our own. So it's a ploy, a tactic to force annexation so that the country would become the so-called 51st state. Saskatchewan just declared its independence. The premier of Saskatchewan making a rather bold statement that Saskatchewan is declaring itself independent. So that follows Alberta. Now Saskatchewan. Is Manitoba next? And if you've got the prairies declaring themselves independent states or perhaps becoming new states of the southern neighbor, what does that mean? That's the breadbasket of the country. That's where all the grain is grown, the wheat. This is where we get our bread, our pasta, our staples come from the prairie provinces. If they go independent, what does that mean for the rest of the country? I mean, from a food security standpoint alone, this is really serious, um, very worrying. And also, if the prairie provinces are eliminated from the country, what does that mean for the transnational highways and the transnational railways that connect the country coast to coast? If BC is cut off from the rest of the country, what's going to happen to British Columbia? Is it also going to declare itself independent? It would seem very likely.
Yeah, I did listen to Trump's speech on tariffs, and I must be missing something because all he was saying is, look, they're charging me X amount of dollars. I'm going to charge them X amount of dollars. Rather than, he wasn't making people pay more unless he was paying more.
Well, whatever simple minded statement or even simple minded motive he has, the reality is the tariffs do great damage economically to the country. I mean, it was protectionist practices adopted by various nations back in the 1930s that caused the Great Depression. Because if you can't sell to your traditional market because of its closed market policies, you're going to lose your market. And so what do? It's going to affect your economy. And it did. I mean, Canada and the United States went through a period of great hardship during the Great Depression. And one of the precipitating factors was this protectionist practice, this protectionist policy that was being adopted by the United States, Canada, and other nations at the time. They may have been trying to protect their economy, but ultimately it inflicted great damage on both sides, and multilaterally it was devastating. the whole Western world was suffering during this time of economic distress. I know the stories. I know how bad it was because I've heard the stories from my older relatives. My parents are no longer with us, but I've heard all their stories. And in the case of my mother, she lived in a small town, and it was because of the frugal and really skillful ways in which her mother managed the family's finances that they were able to maintain their well, they were able to maintain the family. And also, my grandfather had a garden, a big garden, which he tended himself, and he produced so much produce that he was giving food to neighbors and fed half the town. Um, at his funeral, a lot of them came to basically honor him because he helped their families survive during the Great Depression. They would have railway hobos come through town, and they'd come to the house and knock on the door, and they'd say, "Look, I'll do your yard work if you could give me a sandwich." Yeah, that's stories from my mother's side of the family. From my father's side, his father was a banker and he retired, and they went up north to the Muskokas, which are a famous cottage location where these lovely cottages are in northern Ontario, not far from Lake Huron, one of the Great Lakes. And I spent much of my youth up there. Um, my father built a cottage after the war. It was a bit of an owl's nest, a bit ramshackle, but let's say we enjoyed our time up north. But he was his family was very poor. There were 7 children, and he had a job on Sunday where he spent 12 hours on Sunday delivering groceries for a Chinese grocer, and he made $1 delivering groceries, and the dollar was enough to buy the family groceries for the week.
Wow.
And that basically kept the family going. It was so bad for some families in the city that they didn't have meat, and they had to make a broth and just dip stale bread into the broth, and that was their meal. And I guess boiling leather was all they could do in some cases. It was so bad for these poor families. There are
Yeah.
stories from my father's
Wow.
family about how they didn't have shoes. And well, I know he didn't. He went to work in his he went to school in his bare feet walking along the railway line, and he just walked on the cinders, and he built up calluses about an inch thick on the soles of his feet. Yeah, it was dire, the Great Depression. Anyway, we could be headed for another one because of this trade war.
Yeah, it's not just that, it's the illegal immigrants, it's we're currently getting loads of car attacks, they're ramming cars into people in the UK, they're doing it in France.
It's happening here too.
The world's gone mad.
Yeah, I know. It's really dire. So, I mean, all of these things are setting these countries up for failed nation status. And what's going to happen? Blue helmet UN troops moving in and you know, the whole country falling under a UN type of dictatorship, and then the threat of another pandemic with our country signing on to a treaty with WHO to give WHO complete jurisdiction over all of our affairs during the time of a pandemic, um, mandating vaccine passports and mandating these forced injections, getting the mRNA vaccines, which are um, very harmful. They've caused blood clots for thousands of people and have basically killed thousands of people. Um, I don't need to tell you how I'm against vaccines. You know it well, Andy. But I'm particularly against these COVID 19 mRNA vaccines. One of the things it does is it changes your DNA. They say it doesn't, but they're lying. It does. Messenger RNA sends the message to the DNA to do what it does, and it's instructing the cells to manufacture spike proteins like those that are found on the outside of the coronavirus and manufacture them 24/7. Where are those spike proteins going? Throughout the bloodstream, throughout your whole circulatory system. They embed themselves in the blood vessel walls. What does that do? It causes an autoimmune disease response. All these T cells and antibodies come to the site where the spike proteins are located, and that area becomes inflamed because they attack the spike proteins, and this leads to blood clots. Some of the autopsies from those that died from the vaccine who were claimed to be COVID deaths, no, they were vaccine deaths. They found blood clots in some patients. In the autopsy, they found blood clots that were like a foot long. It also causes myocarditis because it attacks the healthy tissue in the heart where these spike proteins have embedded themselves. It can cause aneurysms in the brain because of the same reasons. It embeds itself in the lung tissue and can cause health problems there as well. It's a mess, Andy. There's thousands of people that have suffered vaccine adverse reaction injuries, and many died from the vaccines. And Moderna even has a poison in their vaccine. Um, Probably the Pfizer mRNA vaccine is safer, but I'm just amazed at how harmful these vaccines are, and yet they're being pushed as the only antidote that is valid. I don't know, Andy. It's crazy. So
No, I
the
mean, I think half the world's governments are beginning to listen to some medical experts. I know over here we're quite, they'll let the people in the health service talk about it now, how damaged people are. But, because I was just reading this article, Oxford researchers,
yes,
basically, there's so many cases of vaccine damages, they've lost track of what, who's had it, what caused it, because they're feeling that the information's been destroyed, the medical records.
yeah, I'm not surprised at all. Yeah, well, this is a RICO case, and probably the most damaging and far-reaching RICO case in history. Anyway, the Canadian government has begun ramping up testing on a chilling new COVID mRNA, Aerovax. so you don't need to be injected anymore. It's a nasal spray, and they're even thinking of putting it in the chemtrails so that the whole population is going to inhale the vaccine.
Oh my God.
I mean, this is scary as hell. This is like something that you would expect Nazi Germany to have done, and here we are.
But you know, if it is safer, then well, we don't know, do we?
If it is safer than what?
I was going to say, you know, if it can't do as much harm, surely it'll be suitable for some people who want it.
Well, it does do exactly what the other injectable mRNA vaccine does. It's just that it's administered through nasal spray
All right.
form. And I guess a lot of people that are vaccine hesitant may think it's safer or be deceived into imagining it is going to be safer for them, but they're misguided. It's no safer. It's no um, different from getting the injection, really, in terms of its effect.
I mean, there's
Nevertheless,
a
mhm,
load of people I've met over the years.
mhm,
They've just had the normal childhood vaccinations, and
mhm.
it's caused families problems, you know, big time. So I don't trust anything either. But I did have the COVID Pfizer, but that was for selfish reasons. I wanted to travel, but I mean, luckily I only got the cardiomyopathy out of it, or whatever it was. Yeah,
The
lucky it didn't
myocarditis.
kill me. I haven't had one since, of course.
Well, I know this is a little delicate, and I don't mean to mention it, but you do have another health issue related to your kidneys, and I wonder, and I don't know, Andy. I mean, is it
It all
possible?
happened coincidentally, didn't it? First, I had to go on the blood pressure tablets.
Yes.
Then all of a sudden, oh, you've got a lump in your kidney. You know, in 22 Christmas, it might have been 23. I lose track of time, but it was well after COVID had got well underway. I had to have it removed, and yeah, you're right. It probably caused it. It may not have been the vaccine that actually caused the cancer, but it was the vaccine that caused something to happen within the body to trigger off the cancer, which, according to medical experts, had been there at least 10 years doing nothing. But then all of a sudden, it woke up and it done something.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah, I see. Well, it exacerbated an already existing health condition, in other words.
Yeah, probably that's the better way of putting it.
Well, it's very unfortunate, regardless of what caused it, and I'm always sorry to think about what you went through. I mean, poor man, you don't deserve it.
It certainly makes you wake up and think about what the world's really doing to us, to each other, to yeah. Is it really? Um, Hang on a minute.
Well,
Yeah,
from my standpoint, there's just too many incidents of their them imposing this vaccine upon people for whom it can surely do no good and can be of no benefit. I mean, my cousin, who's already got bone cancer, was compelled to take the COVID vaccine while in hospital. Is it really going to help her? She's terminal anyway. Is it really necessary to put the poor thing through one more medical stress um, when she's already terminal and in great discomfort and dying? Is it so necessary to insist that she take this thing? She took it because she's just one of those people that's always compliant whenever the authorities say she should do something. She would never, ever go against the recommendation of any authority. That's just how she is. And then there's people that were in their 90s and were probably, very, very frail in these nursing homes, and they ended up getting the shot, and far from it protecting them against COVID, it just led to them becoming um, non-responsive and lying there, slowly by inches, dying with no nurses visiting to see how they're getting along or any such thing. And why would you give someone that's in their 90s a vaccine? I mean, as a prophylaxis, it's been shown to be ineffective in so many cases, and certainly this person is so elderly, they're not long for this world anyway. All they're doing by giving them the vaccine is hastening their departure so that it's not a long term care facility, but a rather short term care facility.
No, I agree with you. And I found this study, well, it's an article from the Cancer Therapy Advisors over in the US. I read this a few months ago, and I couldn't find it earlier in the year when I needed it for another reason. But actually now found it, and it says, because I want to send this to my doctor just to see what the comment is. Several studies have suggested that COVID-19 may increase a person's risk of developing cancer, or at least promote metastasis of existing cancers, while other studies have suggested that it may prompt tumor regression. And I think that's what happened to me. Had a tumor, but it made it work quicker. There was not enough evidence, it says, for researchers to draw definite conclusions about SARS-CoV-2 and the impacts on cancer pathogenesis. But there are other viruses, and this is the bit that shocks me more than the first bit, that Rennie Marie Salaby, MD, from Connecticut, the Yale of Medicine, the School of Medicine, she says 7 viruses are known and have proved oncogenic potential in humans, and they are human papillomavirus, whatever that is, HPV, hepatitis B, Epstein-Barr virus, Kaposi sarcoma associated with herpes virus, Merkel cell papillomavirus, hepatitis C, human T-cell leukemia virus. I mean, they're all normal. They're a bit hard to pronounce, but they're all normal conditions. But if you have COVID and you've got them conditions, that's the end. I mean, wow, that's opened me up a bit.
Well, those viruses that are said to cause cancer, the vaccines that are supposed to be antidotes for those alleged cancer causing viruses will surely cause cancer. I'm convinced of it. I'm positive.
And they also mentioned stomach cancers, throat cancer, the esophagus cancer, collateral, I believe that's bowel, or colon cancer. The COVID-19 has proven to, well, they've given me numbers here which are way out of my mind, but they're basically saying that have a COVID will one of them conditions, stomach cancer, breast cancer, throat cancer, colon cancer. You don't have much hope. It's yeah, and these are studies, you know. I mean, and the government ignored them all.
Yeah, well, surely if your immune system is taxed to the limit, warding off this virus that has um, overwhelmed your whole body, then your whole immune system is going to be mobilized against fighting this one antigen. And so, what's going to happen to those tumors that the body is afflicted with? Obviously, there's going to be no immune response in that area at all. And yeah, what's that going to do? It's obviously going to trigger the cancer to grow and spread and, yeah, and kill.
Breaking news one day ago: COVID-19 shots for kids remain on CDC vaccine schedule. And I mean, I think that's terrible. That you know, let the kids and the old people, you know, let them off with it. Let the middle-aged people from 18 to 65, 70 choose whether they want it or not based on their own research. But they shouldn't be forcing kids or elderly to have the injection. I mean, at least I've got a choice now. Again, I don't have to have it if I don't need it, don't
Well,
want it. I mean,
they claim that they're trying to protect the vulnerable. No, they're predators that are going after the vulnerable that can't defend themselves. That's what it's all about. It's a genocide operation, it's a eugenics operation, it's a depopulation operation, clearly. And they ask pregnant mothers to line up for them first, and ostensibly in order to protect them and their child, the unborn child. I, how many of those women miscarried? How many of them suffered miscarriages? Vast numbers. Was that really an effort to protect them and their children? I really, I really suspect it's the reverse, Andy.
absolutely, yeah. Can we just finish up on one little story? I've got
Sure.
this man on tomorrow night, and it's about vax. It's still on the same subject. You might think I've gone bonkers and changing, but no, I'm not changing. I'll put him on screen now because I want people to know that there are real stories attached to this, not just, you know, we're making it up or we've been reading too much Google. Now, this guy, Sandy Smith, um, he's basically a warrior. He was abused as a child in a care home called Quarriers. They were shipped out to Canada and Australia when he was young. Um, Not him personally, he stayed in Glasgow area. But the headline reads: "A dad was brought back from death's door." Now, there's a little bit in here that I'm trying to highlight. After his partner begged doctors to
Not
not
to
to
remove.
remove his life support. Yeah, not to remove. Sandy Smith from Bridgewire, Glasgow, was critically unwell last year. That was 23, 24, after catching COVID, leaving medics at the Royal Alexandra Hospital, Paisley, believing there was nothing else they could do for him. That he was 72-year-old, was just about to have his breathing tubes removed in the July before, thank God, this lady here, his partner, says, "Look, you know, he's been abused as a child. He's came through that. He's a fighter. I want you to, you know, leave his tubes in until the legal limit says they have to be removed." They wanted to remove them early, and he's running and jumping about now. That's the nuts and bolts of that story. You know, it's a bit like the elderly people you were mentioning.
Yeah.
They
Well,
could have been probably even saved.
they had a do not resuscitate order for most of the seniors in the care facilities and during the COVID pandemic that had COVID and were in distress, and they had a do not resuscitate order on those patients. So clearly there was not a strong impetus to keep them around.
No, it's terrible. I mean, I think if they're going to put a do not resuscitate order, there should be a don't resuscitate order form signed as well. You know, so if you want to stay alive, sign it. If you don't want to stay alive, sign it. I mean, what is the world coming to? A doctor's duty is keep you alive, whatever your thoughts are, your religious beliefs, or whatever.
Yeah, I'm amazed, Andy, when I share this information, how many people say, well, you should be very careful about vetting your information. You should be careful about the source, simply because they're horrified by how shocking the information is about the vaccines and how harmful they are, and these various articles that I share, or claims that are being made
I
by
mean, that is a
people
real
people that
person, this one, anyway.
people that are very credible, like Catherine Austin Fitz and various medical experts, and they they've done their research, and well, frankly, so have I. I wrote 3 books on this COVID pandemic, and one of the things I found out was that people with a high ratio of Neanderthal and Denisovan genetics were very susceptible to the virus, and also very susceptible to succumbing to the virus once having been infected. Now, why did Neanderthal and Denisovan genetics? Because in both those cases, the primitive ancestors of uh, the primitive um, relatives of Homo sapiens, which Homo sapiens bred with, clearly, because that's why some segments of the population have a high ratio of Neanderthal and Denisovan genetics. What has occurred with those people is that they are vulnerable to the spike protein on the coronavirus. They're very vulnerable and susceptible to the virus because their immune system is not adapted to defending successfully against the spike proteins on the coronavirus. So I thought about that, and I realized that the virus is chewing at the low end of the evolutionary tree. So that raises suspicions that it's a eugenics operation to eliminate from the gene pool those with a certain genetic profile, high ratio of Neanderthal or Denisovan genetics. I mean, Neanderthals and Denisovan as a species are thought to be inferior to Homo sapiens. So, yeah, I don't know. This is suspicious. Why would they be vulnerable to this particular virus? And I've thought further, and I realized that the caste system in India may have been created in order to protect the Brahmin caste against breeding with the Dravidian population, which would have had a much higher ratio of Neanderthal genetics. And this is true in the population of Bangladesh. They had a higher incidence of COVID infection and COVID death. And here in Canada, there are pockets of Bangladeshis living in certain areas of, for example, Toronto, the GTA. In the GTA, we have a place called well, never mind. There's a suburb here in the GTA where there's a high population of Bangladeshis living there, and that particular part of the GTA had the highest infection rate of COVID. And this is what I'm saying, is that the problem here with this Bangladeshi population is that they had a high ratio of Neanderthal genetics in their genome. So I guess we've exhausted that topic.
Well,
Yeah.
pardon the punch